I think this is an amazing film and really interesting. I think it's politically bullshit.
Oh, yes, of course, because there's a bunch of closed-minded racist morons that represent people in the seats of power.
So this is part of that conversation of like the imagined American working class that we've been doing for decades now.
These are Bollywood musicals. They just don't have dance numbers because Hollywood doesn't have the balls to just, put in a dance number. And if you can direct an action sequence, you can direct a dance sequence.
It's 5 fucking stars. It's absolutely unbelievably beautiful and amazing. And it is total propaganda for the Cuban Revolution. I don't think anymore that you can avoid fighting inside and outside of the state at the same time. I think there may be multiple ways to do that. I don't think electoral politics is the only way to do that.
Yeah, but some shit's got to get burned down too, so...
Right.
Honestly, it kind of warms my heart that somebody out there was thinking that The Watermelon Woman was a threat to, white, hetero, cis, Christian culture.
I know we're saying that this isn't technically like a good movie, but a movie with surprisingly good elements and a really fucked up package.
This ending, you have good characters that are entirely powerless against the unstoppable evil capitalists.
Mm-hmm. Only after Avengers did Marvel movies start doing as well as Ghost.
Right.
Starring Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, and some very phallic clay.
Did the word pornography ever enter your mind when you were watching this film, Isaac?
Nope.
And I think it has the politics of cinema stamp of approval. If you want to use this as a first date movie, go for it.
It seemed to have worked out for my folks. Fuck capitalism. Fuck all of this stuff.
Welcome all to the Politics of Cinema. On this show, we believe that films are never neutral. There's a political as well as an artistic message captured in every film, in every country, in every time period, and we're on the lookout for all of it. My name is Aaron Spears.
And my name is Isaac Miller. And on this episode, we are ending our summer series on American urban landscapes in cinema with a double feature episode, which is our most chaos episode, because both of us have come with movies. Neither of us knows which ones, and we're going to have to talk them through to see if we can create a coherent double feature. Last time we had some juggling around about what the theme even meant exactly, and we worked it through on air. And then we actually chose 2 different double features, which were really good ones, actually fantastic ones, if I do say so myself. For both of us, I mean, it was brilliant, and
I'll second that brilliance. No problem.
Yeah, right. Now, no, it was quality.
Well, that was like communism in film, which is like a much more, I don't know, like amorphous topic to kind of wrestle with. So that made me kind of really dig in and like try to look at several films I know pretty well from different angles. Whereas this one being urban landscapes as portrayed on film, as we've been saying throughout this series, like you could just focus on only New York City films or only LA film. Like there's huge chunks of cinema out there that this applies to.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a bit of, I think I like the chaos of it. I don't know if I would describe it as chaos, but I know you do. But like I always look for, like I get the energy out of not knowing what films you're going to bring up in the conversation, Isaac. So what are we, for folks that have been listening to the entire, what we did? We did Falling Down. We did City of Hope, we did The Plot Against Harry, and we did Summertime, all under this American urban landscapes on film. What's the quick definition, Isaac, for what we're looking for, what we're taking, I guess, a look at in cinema with this theme?
I don't know. It's been, I mean, so, every summer we have a theme, and this is definitely by far the loosest. But I feel like what we've ended up doing, we actually sort of created as we went along, and each one has sort of captured a little bit about the changing urban sociology of the given places, or and interesting comparatively, or the perceptions they're in, the politics of them at the very least in film. Mm-hmm. But also to a certain degree, outside of it, like reflecting what's happening sometimes pretty interestingly. I mean, sort of veering between the changing politics of white ethnics and sort of usually, people of color in a given urban landscapes. But I think, it's sort of, it's the changing face of cities in film, and also just cities in general in the post-war period, really, because we've gone from 2020 to 1971.
Yeah, yeah,
So in some ways, the neoliberal period.
yeah. And we did inadvertently because we were picking these films as we went along, and I think also we're picking films we hadn't seen before, but we thought represented this topic pretty well. Although I'd seen Summertime, I think that was the only case of seeing it ahead of time. We did kind of go back and forth, New York, L.A., New York. Or actually, we did L.A., New York, back to L.A. those 4 films. So we'll see if that cycle also holds true as we go through our picks here.
Yeah, I really tried to avoid them, the two big two, and failed.
Well, maybe it's something about those cities, especially the way they're portrayed on film, that just call out to you or just work for you.
Well, it's also, I mean, we said this on air last time. The most compelling recent movies about urban areas have been about the Bay Area, and I intentionally avoided those because we want to talk about them at some point.
Yeah. That's true. Well, how many did you end up with, Isaac, in total that you've brought to the episode?
Let's say about 5, and I accidentally sort of created a couple double features that we can break up.
Well, maybe we won't need to. Maybe you've got some compelling double features. I narrowed it down to 3. So why don't you kick us off with one of your double features?
Okay. So this is my desperate attempt to get out of New York, LA. And really, I'm sure listeners can come up with loads of other movies. It was just, so I went to Philly.
Oh, okay.
And I went to grungy 70s Philly. So I chose Mikey and Nicky and Rocky.
Interesting.
And, if anybody's not aware of Mikey and Nicky, we never covered it for the show per se, but I think it's been brought up. It's by Elaine May. It was made earlier in the 70s, but came out in 1976. It stars Peter Falk and John Cassavetes as 2 best friends who are also low-level mobsters. John Cassavetes is on the run for sort of screwing over their boss, and Peter Falk is, well, helping him, but you have to watch the movie.
Peter Falk is Mikey.
I got a terrific suggestion for you, Nick. I suggest you find somebody you can trust.
John Cassavetes is Nicky.
They're gonna kill me, Nick. They're gonna kill me.
Mikey and Nicky. On a night like this, there are no rules.
You give me that in 30 seconds, you hear me, or I'll kill you. I'm gonna die. You're not gonna die. What do you think they're planning? To shoot you in a movie house?
Mikey and Nicky.
I'm really getting the treatment tonight. Tonight's my night.
On a night like this, there is no trust.
They're gonna kill me. Honey, I'm serious now.
Well, I'm not interested.
I'm coming with you.
There is no time.
I know it for a fact. They're gonna kill me. You are not gonna die.
On a night like this, there is no choice. Peter Falk, John Cassavetes, Mikey and Nicky. Written and directed by Elaine May.
Ma, if anything happens to me, Mikey did it.
And it is, generally considered very underseen and also one of the best American movies of the post-war period. I don't know. Like, it's a 5-star, unbelievable masterpiece about friendship. But a lot of it, basically, it's set in one night in which they are running around Philly. And also, and there's an assassin played by Ned Beatty, who's absolutely amazing in this movie. I mean, not what you would see. And actually, I mean, he's perfect. And basically, he spends a large portion of the movie in traffic or parked trying to find John Cassavetes' character and not being able to. He keeps showing up late to things because he's getting his directions wrong. Because he's just sitting there with a map. It's great. I mean, part of it, the thing is, Elaine May's from Philly originally, and she also grew up in a family that was mob connected.
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask if it was like, is this a personal story for her, or?
It's originally based off of a story that she'd heard about assassin who, a hitman who had to kill somebody they knew. But this is also like, this is nothing original. I am literally just stealing from everybody who's talked about this movie. This is a movie by a brilliant, woman director about masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
about male friendship. And it's not an accident, you know. But, in terms of, so part of it is what you get a sense of is you get a sense of sort of different parts of Philly, or the metro area at least. You sort of see rundown dive bars for mainly sort of older white working class people. You see sort of bars and establishments that are more for more working class or even middle class black people, in the way that sort of they interact, because they end up in one of those bars, and since Cassavetes' character is a giant asshole, he throws his weight around,
Mm-hmm.
and because people recognize him, I can't remember. They might actually confuse him for a cop, but I think it's that they actually know he's in the mob, so
Uh-huh.
people back off of him, even though he should get his ass kicked.
Right.
And you also sort of get a sense of like a little bit of a sense of sort of suburban or semi-suburban Philly, where there's neighborhood committees. I mean, this probably the early 70s, where they've got their own private patrol cars and have to vet people before they live in the neighborhood, and you can guess what they're vetting them on. That's not said in the movie. So like you do get a sense of the urban fabric of the city.
Okay.
And despite this is the difficulty, basically any urban area in a 70s film is going to look grungy as hell.
Yes.
And New York is sort of the king of this. Dog Day Afternoon, which I'm literally just not doing because it's too on the note, but I mean, even though it's a perfect movie, but like, you're not going to match that. And in a certain sense, you're watching this, it's like, could this be New York if you don't know Philly? Maybe, but it doesn't quite feel like it. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like a different urban landscape, but because I don't know Philly as well as I'd like.
Yeah.
But nonetheless,
I don't think any particular specific urban setting, like in this particular case, we're talking about Philly, like there is the flavor that is unique to that, but like I don't think it's going to be a 100 unique story that could only take place there. Like you could get shades of that if you set it, in a Chicago, or if you set it in Dallas. You know what I mean? Like it ends up being wholly unique to that experience because of like the flavor that in this case Elaine May is able to work into the story, or the actors are able to bring to it, maybe like some nuanced accent work or something. But really, it's going to be the way it's filmed, I think. That gives it kind of that visual thing that sets it apart. Like, is it celebrating the fact that it's in Philadelphia, or is it like just sort of just generic urban landscape of buildings and apartment building, or whatever? You know what I mean?
I think it's just there, and you'd have to know Philly well to tell.
Okay.
Or to sort of to be able to pick that out. In that sense, it doesn't really. Most of the movies that we've watched so far are very distinctively of their place.
Right, right.
And for me, at least, as somebody who doesn't know Philly very well, I feel like you can to a certain degree, and you can feel it, and you can sort of get a sense of it. But you could potentially do this in New York. I don't think it would be the same, and I'm not sure it would work quite the same way. But nonetheless, it's there. There's a lot of
Well, also knowing her writing and things too, it sounds like the way you're describing it too, like it feels like very like lived-in performances. Especially if you're going to focus in on only doing one like day in the life of, in this particular case as well. Generally, especially with these actors too, like they're known for like great character studies.
Yeah, they're I mean, they actually met each other over this movie in like 1970. But by the time it was shot, they'd done
Really?
a lot of work together in Cassavetes' movie. Yeah, apparently.
I never really thought about when they had met. I just assumed it was on a Cassavetes film itself, just because Falk is known for that. But that's cool. The origin story is right here.
At least from what I was getting from some of the videos I was watching, Falk actually pitched it to Cassavetes.
Interesting.
And the way he said it to Cassavetes is like immediately like, yes. And he's like, Falk is like, no, this is Elaine May. This is really important. It's a brilliant script. Like, really think about it. And he's like, basically Cassavetes is like, if it's Elaine May and she wrote it and she's directing it, I want in. I don't have to really think about it.
Right.
Which says a lot right there, right?
That's kind of awesome. Yeah.
It's very awesome. But no, I think that was but by the time they were acting, they've been in the movie because it took forever to get made. And this is a movie where Elaine May literally had to steal film from the studio to prevent them from fucking it over and cutting it like without her.
Well, and they still did. from what I remember. Like, actually, this is one I haven't seen, but I've read about, where like the original release of this was known as like the Paramount cut, and then she got like her version. I want to say end of the decade, maybe early '80s, finally out to folks.
But by the time they're acting together, they've been friends for years, and
Right.
they're two of the greatest actors of their generation, and like you said, like very expressive. And so it's really, I mean, there's some scenes where they're physically fighting, which are like balletic in a certain sense, but like not in the way you'd think. These are not like physical actors in that sense,
Right.
but just the way they're doing it is just and it's on the streets of Philly.
Yeah.
And so I think you can pull out the urban sociology of the area. It's not quite what we've been doing this summer, but nonetheless, I think it is a strong contender.
Yeah. Oh, nice segue, Isaac. Speaking of contenders.
His name is Sylvester Stallone. He's the star of a new film called Rocky. He's been described as tough, handsome, talented, sexy, sensitive, dynamic, brilliant. He's been compared to Nicholson, De Niro, and Brando, but he is Rocky. He's the man who could be loved by only one woman because somehow she gets beneath the pain. He's every nobody who ever needed somebody.
Rocky, do you believe that America is the land of opportunity?
Yeah.
I'll break both your arms so they don't work for you.
He's every man who ever settled for something less.
What about my pride, Nick? At least you have pride. I ain't had no pride. I ain't had enough. I want to get that. I want to get that. Terrific. I mean, you could be a heartbreak. You walk down the street breaking hearts the way you're looking. Very sharp.
He's the man who never had a chance until now. Rocky. His whole life was 1,000,000 to 1 shot. His name is Sylvester Stallone, but you will always remember him as Rocky.
So the second part of this double feature you said was Rocky, which in a certain way, I think when we're talking about like the hallmarks of the city, this almost works with some of its visuals and cinematography as like it hits all the tourist destinations. Like, oh, look, this is Philly.
Exactly.
With the cinematography. So before we talk about Rocky though, what order do you put these in as the double feature? Is it Rocky first or Rocky second?
Well, I don't even know if this is a good double feature, frankly. I think it's literally they're both set in Philly. I mean, I love putting together double features. Anybody who listens to it, it listens to this, it knows that. They're both movies about working class people with mob connections who have not lived up to their potential.
Gotcha.
And so that's what connects them. They're very tonally different because as gritty a 70s, did you know this is a movie about working class Italians movie as Rocky is, ultimately, and this is not anything against it, it's Mikey and Nicky is ultimately a noir and Rocky is not. Rocky is a love story. Rocky is a romance.
Yeah.
And so it's very different. I mean, so part of it is what you get the sense of, once again, is sort of white ethnic neighborhoods in a certain sense in the city. And then you sort of hit, I mean, the fame of the museum steps is really from Rocky, I think. Like the museum steps that he runs up when he's working out. So like part of it is, I mean, this is a movie that's so influential that it actually like, creates the sites. But it,
that's a good point. I was thinking about that backwards. You're right.
I mean, I feel this way about, I'm going to throw in a third movie very quickly. I was feel this way about Creed, which is, a Rocky, part of the Rocky franchise, but switches so the other thing about Rocky is that it's dealing with the racial politics of America at the time. One can judge how well it does that. But Apollo Creed in some ways is creating as a large life a character as Rocky himself, right? Which is why you can do a sequel like Creed. Creed is also set in Philly, but is showing things from basically like the perspective of a young black man.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like there's Philly cheesesteaks, there's Jones. I mean, there's a lot of this sort of stuff that you sort of associate with the city. There's stuff about the music scene. There's, you get a sense of it, and there's stuff about regional boxing, which I don't know how accurate that is. But, you could throw that in there. But, it's, once again, not like quite the urban sociology that at the level we've been dealing with, but it's sort of in there. Rocky, though, is very much like, you've got sort of, you see the housing stock in the neighborhoods and the feel of it and the open air markets and all of this stuff, right? Like you get a sense even of the geography of the city, sort of, well, especially while he's running during the big training montage. Thematically, I think the two, I take it back, I actually think they do work, but as a twisted double feature. And I think you start with Rocky, because Rocky will put you in a good mood.
Yeah, and it kind of orients you within like the greater landscape of Philadelphia, probably a little bit better than Mikey and Nike does.
Yeah.
I said Nike, sorry, Mikey and Nicky. My tongue always wants to rhyme that for some reason. But then you can kind of dive into the nitty gritty on a much more granular scale with Mikey and Nicky.
Yeah.
Is your second one.
And thematically, which does not really have to do with Philly, I sort of point out there's similarities about people not living up to their potential. You can make arguments about masculinity and so forth. But whereas Rocky is someone who's ultimately a sweet person with all of his flaws, and in some ways channels that masculinity in a way that's much more positive.
Mm-hmm.
Mikey and Nicky is unsparing.
Gotcha. Wait, so are we including Creed in the lineup, or you're just sort of using that as a talking point going through these two movies?
If you haven't seen Creed, you really should.
I mean, I have. I just haven't seen.
I meant the audience. Yeah, Mikey and Nicky, obviously. Yeah. I mean, you can throw in Creed. I think Creed would in some ways update and fill in some of the things that Rocky's doing and deals with the landscape in some ways just as much.
Well, I like the updating too, like you said. I think that's kind of an interesting way to go. And also, if I remember correctly, I've only seen Creed once, but it's not like the romance the way Rocky is. It's more of like dealing with ideas of like, legacy and friendship, really, I guess, because it's mostly like a Rocky Creed friendship. The son I never had.
I mean, there is a romance in it, and it is a romance with Tessa Thompson, which you better romance Tessa Thompson, right? And it's definitely strong. They definitely give her time.
Yeah.
But I don't think ultimately it's quite as central as in Rocky. And the mentorship relationship in Rocky is really, really important. But ultimately, since it's part of the Rocky series, the relationship between Creed and Rocky is going to be more important.
Well, honestly, I just brought up the posters as we were talking about it, and like the original Rocky poster, it's black and white. It's it's been ages since I saw it. What's her name?
Adrian. Yeah.
Adrian. Yeah. It's Adrian and Rocky holding hands, walking away in silhouette. And if you look at Creed, it's Sylvester Stallone and Michael B. Jordan, just like hanging out by the ropes, like, mentor mentee.
Right. Yeah. No, it's
interesting.
The way it's framed, it's going to be more central.
So as I was kind of thinking about this urban landscapes thing in cinema, it occurred to me, this is the ultimate in like regional filmmaking, which I'm a cursory fan of. Most of it has been through watching like low budget regional stuff, mainly from like I guess like 60s, 70s era, seeing how different sort of film styles developed in different regions of the country. But that really begs the question. I was like, wait, so who are these cinematic voices for particular cities? And because I mention him often enough on the show, I wanted to include a Martin Scorsese film. I don't think we could do like American Urban Landscapes without at least having a Scorsese film in the conversation here, trying to put together a double feature. And I also wanted to make sure I was representing not just contemporary, either from our point of view right now with like Summertime or something that seems that was within our lifetime, which was most of the ones we've already discussed in this particular series. I wanted to go back and look at like, here's an OG urban landscape. So I went with Gangs of New York from 2002.
On my challenge, we have met at this chosen ground to settle for good and all. Who holds sway over the 5 points? Us natives or the foreign hordes?
With this knife that struck him down, let me put to rest my father's ghost. Who are you?
You're the priest's son, aren't you? His name's Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
I'm New York.
Everything you see belongs to me. The newsboys and quick thieves and blind tigers here in paradise. Everybody owes, everybody pays.
What do you think you're doing?
I'm dancing.
So why aren't you dancing with him?
I'm not in love with him.
There's more of us coming off these ships every day. 15,000 Irish a week. Get all of us together and we ain't got a gang. We got an army.
Challenge.
Challenge accepted.
Which has a great tagline. America was born in the streets. I mean, that almost kind of fits one of the things we're looking at with looking at urban landscapes on cinema right here. Synopsis for Gangs of New York, if you're unfamiliar with this work by Martin Scorsese, it's 1863. Amsterdam returns to the 5 Points of New York City to seek vengeance against the psychotic gangland kingpin, Bill the Butcher, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, who murdered his father years ago. Leonardo DiCaprio plays Amsterdam. And actually, interesting, kind of comparative to Rocky here, it ends up becoming almost like a mentor-mentee relationship between the two as Amsterdam works his way up within Bill the Butcher's criminal empire. So I think this one is also really unique because it gives us, like I said, a different urban landscape to look at. This is a post-Civil War 1863 New York City. Specifically, they mentioned the 5 Points, but it covers a few different areas. So it's the gritty in the streets part of the 5 Points area in New York City, but we also see a couple times the film branches out to a pretty significant wealthy neighborhood that Cameron Diaz's character is working and scamming in. But we also get this really interesting portrayal of Boss Tweed. That Jim Broadbent plays Boss Tweed in this one, or ascending to become Boss Tweed. But we get the early machinations of Tammany Hall and Tammany politics going on here, which I think is just fascinating. And you have Bill the Butcher working with Tweed in here as like somebody who holds sway over this large chunk of an area of New York City here around the 5 Points. As far as the way we were looking at these different urban environments, also the politics and the sociology represented in these, it's kind of interesting because this movie has more elements of a classical Western, like Law of Man meeting the Law of the Land. And you have a not barely functioning, you have a major metropolitan area, or what would become a major metropolitan area of New York City here, with a massive amount of people coming into the country through Ellis Island here. And there's a give and take set up between Daniel Day-Lewis's Bill the Butcher character, who considers himself a native. I think even says it in the trailer, like fighting off the foreign hordes who are coming into his city and his territory. And it's a dirty, like bloody as hell, like knockdown, drag out kind of street life existence that you see played out in the 5 Points area. But then you also see the beginnings of, I don't know if like civilization is the right word here. Like you see the idea of like private fire departments and not something that's like collectively run by a city in the movie. At one point, Boss Tweed mentions, like Jim Broadbent is Tweed here. He even mentions like, we need to get schools, we need to get sewers, we need to get hospitals. And he's, these basic social services that need to be there to have like a functioning, large metropolitan kind of area. And so you kind of see the wildness of what it's like when that isn't a thing, but there's enough of a population that you do need that sort of thing. And I don't know, it just feels very, very raw. And I don't know, it just has like this kind of open wound kind of look at how civilization is when there isn't really like a structure there to set up to handle the number of people that are coming into a specific area of land.
I mean, I think that is, part of it is this is sort of the thing that you see in a certain sense in lots of different urban landscapes all over the world, right? Large portions, maybe majority of urban livers live in, shanty towns or slums that are unplanned and get municipal services through struggle. I mean, I used to live in Cairo, and there's the Ashwayet, and, they're getting water and electricity just by siphoning off of the system. To a degree, I mean, it varies. They're massive. Yeah. There's 10 million people who live in them. They're not all poor. There are many, there's different social classes that live in them. It's very complicated. And so, like, I think this is a portrayal. I think that's an interesting thing about it. I want to mention something about the historical veracity of the movie, which is not important to the quality or even the sociology of what's being portrayed.
Oh, no, it's not. Even Scorsese talks about it. It's one of the rare commentary tracks even that he does on one of his movies about like, this is more based on like folklore. It's not based on, but like a mix of like all these different influences. Like, yes, here's some realistic parts. Here's some kind of like folklore elements.
Right.
Here's some urban myth elements even mixed in there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the degree of chaos and unformedness, and certainly the degree of gang violence. I mean, I think that the original book that is based off of from like 1928 is like largely not historical. I mean, it's
no, it's not. Yeah, I read it at the time the movie came out, and you're just like, okay, this just reads like you're reading like Paul Bunyan or something. Like it's pretty ridiculous.
Right, but part of it is, I mean, you look at the poster for this thing, and you've got the skyline of modern New York. So,
well, it ends with that too, which is very weird.
It ends with that. Well, it's an argument about how the city was made, right?
Yep. Well, and what's interesting too about it is I hadn't really thought about this until I was prepping for the show here, but this film itself is telling the story of like what he's considering like the birth of like his New York City. Because I mean, he's born and raised in New York City, and he's talked about how this movie is telling the story that ends up being the foundation for all of his other films, specifically the New York City set films though too. And then I thought, oh my God, that'd be an amazing project, is to watch all of Scorsese's New York City films in chronological order from when they're set.
That would be really fun.
That would be a really fun series to program somewhere. I don't. I mean, I may just do that in my basement at some point. But I was like, I need another new way to go through Scorsese's filmography, because I've done that several times already. But I was like, ooh, that could be kind of interesting. But I hadn't really thought about it that way. That it's like, yeah, this is the story that creates the city that all of his other films take place in.
Well, we should do it for this podcast sometime, because I don't know how much Scorsese we've done.
We haven't done any officially. I mean, I pitched Wolf of Wall Street in our last double feature episode, but
I mean, that's part of it. I think we've avoided. I have some big names too that like we've just never done them because it was like, well, we'll get to that, and then 3 years out, we're like, we'll get to it.
Hey, we should get to that. But no, that's why I'm bringing them up now. I actually have two directors I'm filling in some politics of cinema discussion gaps today with. But yeah, so that's my nominee I'm putting forward is Gangs of New York, Martin Scorsese's film from 2002.
I think it really fits well, even with, I mean, in a certain sense, at a more, at a certain sort of level of legend with City of Hope, or, I mean, with it fits with a lot of the specifically the white ethnics and conflict thing, and racial politics too. It fits with a lot of what we've been doing up until now. So
yeah. So you said you had a couple double features and then another one. So do you want to do your next double feature, or?
I think I'll go with my next double feature.
All right. What you got?
So I've got an LA and New York movie, but neither of them are set in real LA and New York. In fact, like what the movie you just did, they're in a legendary one, a heightened space, So number one is The Warriors by Walter Hill from 1979. An absolutely beloved piece of scuzzy cinema.
These are the armies of the night.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
The Furies. The Boppers. The Hi-Hats. The Lizzies. The Turnbull ACs. The Gramercy Riffs.
Yeah,
and these are the Warriors.
We know about the Warriors. They're a heavy outfit.
They're from Coney Island.
Warriors? You guys are the big dudes, huh?
Now they're in the Bronx.
We're going back.
27 miles behind enemy lines.
It's the only choice we got.
Between them and safety stand 20,000 cops and 100,000 sworn enemies.
I want them all. I want all the warriors.
In which a sort of almost alternate reality in New York, in which 100,000 street gang members all dress in outlandish costumes on theme and control their neighborhoods like fiefdoms. And in which the head of the most powerful gang in town, street gang specifically. We're not talking about the mob. The mob is mentioned, actually. Cyrus calls a meeting of all of the gangs, is assassinated seemingly at random, but is blamed on the warriors from Coney Island, and if they have to fight their way across the city. And it fucking rules. And it's, you know, it's a movie about effective public transit.
I've never heard this movie described that way. I've never seen this one, but that's awesome. But I also know that's like something that you're very passionate about as well, just personally.
We can watch this anytime you want. You really should. You will love it. It's not actually effective public transit, because the problem is that public transit keeps getting disrupted and they keep having to get off. But it is like descriptions of like how you get around the city, and it's like, well, we have to get through all these neighborhoods. If you can get on public transit and it's not like blocked by gangs trying to get you, because every gang in the city goes after them because supposedly they killed the, you know, Cyrus. So like you have to go through all of the, you know, it is a city. So in an era like the 70s and then into the 80s, especially in the 70s, you're dealing with, I'm gonna make a generalization, a dangerous generalization. In the 70s, you're dealing a lot of times with not always realistic urban decay in New York and other cities, but a lot of times it attempts at realism in New Hollywood, right?
Okay, yeah.
That's what we're going for.
Yeah.
Like Mean Streets or Dog Day Afternoon are recognizable New York movies. Warriors sort of bridges into the absurdity of like urban hellscape warfare, which, I mean, you start seeing with, you know, your Death Wishes and your Dirty Harrys. It starts in the 70s, even when those are sort of more grounded. I don't know about Death Wish. But then once you get into the 80s, it's just like totally out of control. And this is both a recognizably 70s movie in terms of music and style.
Okay.
But is moving into a world. I mean, it's not really bridging. It's not an 80s movie. It's very much a 70s movie. It's very dystopian. Like, I mean, the 70s is a period of a lot of dystopian films. So maybe I should take myself back. Maybe that's wrong. But it's a gritty New York movie by way of like people dressed up as if they're in a musical, and you know, just the outlandishness of it. And I love that heightenedness, right? I love whatever, but it's very much a New York movie of a mythical New York. You know, you totally map out the city by neighborhood, by where, you know, and sort of what it gets across is the territorialness, like you know, if you're from this borough in New York, you're from this borough. They're Coney Island gang. So it reflects the overall, like, not just, you know, street gangs, but, you know, the culture of New York, of you know, the sheer importance of the boroughs, which are large enough to be cities in themselves, right?
Well, and this feels like one of those two. You're like you were saying with the other Mickey and Nike. Oh my God, I keep fucking that one up. Mikey and Nikki. This is a uniquely New York City story and setting.
This is absolutely, well, that's just it. It's like, it's an absolutely New York setting in a way. I mean, it more grounded. I mean, Mikey and Nikki, for me, it struggles because I don't know Philly and I can imagine it in Boston.
Sure.
Let's say maybe not New York, but this is a New York movie. I mean, this is, you know, this is what it is. My second feature is an LA movie, and is also one in which the sort of surreal or hyper reality, magical realism maybe is the right term, is used to get across the city, but this time in the the mid 80s, and that is Alex Cox's Repo Man.
Suppose you're thinking about a plate of shrimp. Suddenly somebody will say like plate or shrimp or plate of shrimp out of the blue, no explanation. No point in looking for one either. It's all part of a cosmic unconsciousness.
You eat a lot of acid, Miller, back in the hippie days?
Sell that car and send me your money. You don't need that car.
Put it on a plate, son. You'll enjoy it more.
Couldn't enjoy it anymore, Mom. This is swell.
What's this?
Charming friends you got there, Otto.
Thanks. I made it myself.
I had a lobotomy in the end.
Lobotomy? Isn't that for loonies?
Not at all. A friend of mine had one.
I do my best thinking on the bus. That's how come I don't drive, see?
You don't even know how to drive.
I don't want to know how. I don't want to learn, see? The more you drive, the less intelligent you are.
So when you first said a New York and an LA movie and the way you were kind of describing them, I honestly thought you were going to go with Escape from New York and then Escape from LA.
Oh my God. I should have. That kills me.
Well, you know, future double feature at some point, maybe. But okay, so why Repo Man?
Well, I think they fit together in the sense of the sort of hyper reality that they're portraying that's trying to get an element of the city, right? I mean, Repo Man is this very, you know, a punk rock, you know, sort of like, you know, this sort of desolate Reagan era feel for it. But it's, you know, it's a movie that moves around the urban landscape and captures sort of this sort of desolation and despair and like aimlessness of LA, you know, this mega sprawl city, right?
Sure.
This city that's not a city, right? I mean, LA itself is relatively small within the nearly 20 million people who live in the LA area. But, you know, what is the urban area? It's much larger than LA itself. And so Repo Man is a movie that does a lot of things. But for me, in terms of our themes, it's one that sort of, for me, it sort of brings out the overwhelmingness of the city. I don't know. And a sense of urban decay that mirrors heightened urban decay that mirrors the Warriors, but in a very specifically LA feel.
What I was going to ask is like, because Warriors sound like again, I haven't seen Warriors. Actually, I haven't seen Repo Man either. But Warriors sounded like such a specific, like this is a New York City story. You do get that vibe off of Repo Man from an LA perspective, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, for when, you know, there's a fair amount of driving.
Number one, driving, check.
I mean, it's not that much. I mean, but it, you know,
I get what you mean.
But it's, you know, I mean, it's Alex Cox. It's very heightened and gets straight up like, you know, fantastical.
Yeah.
It's also one of the best roles that, you know, that really lets Harry Dean Stanton, you know, do his thing, which is nice. But yeah, no, I mean, I think this is as a double. I think it gets at you know, it gets at a particular moment of crisis of urban America, right?
Mm-hmm.
But through you know, through in a sense fantasy.
I definitely need to get on this one because it checks a lot of boxes that I am a fan of, being because it's also like a notorious kind of cult movie, midnight movie. That I think I've even worked at when I was working at the Art House Theater. Like this was a cult movie that was shown. I just didn't watch it when it was shown. I really need to get on this one.
I mean, both of them are like perfect midnight movies.
Oh, Warrior. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I don't know if we ever programmed Warriors, but that was definitely like a highly requested one. Like, oh, you should definitely do the Warriors.
Yeah, I mean, they're both. I mean, Warriors more so, or like sort of classic exploitation movies in a sense, except
another genre I like.
Yeah, have reached a level and are sort of at a level of craft that, you know, just overshadows.
Yeah, I should say a genre I like when there is some craft involved, because I've watched plenty of ones where you're just like, nope. No, thank you. So, see, those are really interesting because those do clearly thematically like complement each other so well. A few years apart too, so you don't get, like you said, one's 84, one's, what was Warriors, 79?
Yeah.
So it's a few years apart, but also again sticking with since we've been kind of highlighting New York and LA going through the series, like you have one of each now put together. I think it's a kind of an interesting way to combine them. I wonder if they would work. Well, we'll see how they work when we talk through a double feature here shortly. But I wonder how they would work paired up, or like on their own, but paired up with something else.
Could I just say, both movies are also ones that deal with street gangs and restless youth, but whereas one, you find cohesion and identity up to a point in the Warriors. Actually, I mean, it sort of runs into a wall in a sense. Repo Man is in many ways a movie of the neoliberal 80s in which sort of collectivity has collapsed. And LA is good for that. And my final feature will really bring that out.
Collectivity has collapsed. Oh, that's kind of another good segue, because the other one I picked or one of the other ones I picked that I want to talk about is actually highlights what it's like when a certain segment of a community comes together to try to achieve something that is going to correct a societal ill that is plaguing not just their neighborhood, but their city in a larger extent as well. So I mentioned Martin Scorsese already. This is the other point where I am bringing up another heavy hitter I think that needs to be covered much more in depth, but I didn't want to include it here because when I'm thinking about the American urban landscape in cinema, I also think of Spike Lee. And I don't think you can not mention Spike Lee, but also he's another New York guy. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with one of his movies that I adore, that I think more people need to see, because based on box office receipts, people did not watch this movie. And I think it's one of his like top 5 movies that I've seen, and I've seen a shitload of his movies. That is Chirac from 2015.
This is an emergency. This is an emergency.
Homicides in Chicago, Illinois have surpassed the death toll of American Special Forces in Iraq.
Hey, Ptolemies.
Welcome to Chirac.
Chirac, where we at, my city?
Land of pain, misery, and strife.
Everybody here got a man banging and slanging, fighting for the flag, risking that long zip of the cadaver bag.
All to the bang bang.
Bang bang.
It all started with a gorgeous Nubian sister.
What's up, Spinner?
They call her Lysistrata, a woman like no other.
You just try taking away their guns.
Okay, the 30 poppers. Cause when my gun go boom, I'll make sure a Trojan end up in the next.
All right. Well, what else do they love?
Repeat after me. I will deny all rights of access or entrance.
I will deny all rights of access or entrance.
Lysistrata had them all take a solemn oath.
Lock it up! Lock it up!
Stop the murder madness, or there would be no more Pope. The situation's out of control, because I'm in front of an empty stripper pole. That's right. You get snubbed.
Oh, snap! We gon' make sure these fools put down these guns.
Police signs, every day. People die, every day.
This one's interesting to me because he's a New York guy. Like, he's made a ton of New York films, same with Scorsese. But this one is set in the south side of Chicago, specifically in the Englewood neighborhood. And in order to tell this story, he was a very contemporary issue in 2015 and is still very much a contemporary issue, although I don't think it's quite as bad as it was in 2015. But south side of Chicago got the nickname Chirac because there was a higher body count than, I think it was like special forces in Iraq at the time. So like gun violence is a plague in our society here. And, speaking from 2022 perspective, but also 2015 perspective. So Spike Lee worked with a collaborator of his, Kevin, I think it's Kevin Wilmot. They co-wrote Black Klansman together, another top tier Spike Lee movie. But they wanted to take a look at gun violence as a societal ill, but specifically gun violence as it relates to gangs, and really wanted to look at as a contemporary issue in Chicago in 2015 era. What they did then was they took the Aristophanes play Lysistrata, in which the title character Lysistrata organizes basically withholding sex from the men until war is stopped. So in this particular case, they took Lysistrata, who is still the main character of this particular story too. Tanoia Paris plays Lysistrata. and she organizes all of the women in her neighborhood that are about her age or so. They're going to go on sex strike. They're going to withhold sexual activity from their male counterparts until the gang violence and the gun violence stops. And she organizes that and is somewhat effective, but also learns the lesson of this isn't like a thing that just fixes itself overnight, so to speak. I found this movie to be fascinating in a way that people, because it played for like 2 weeks when we were both, I don't know if were you working at the art house at the same time when this came out?
No, I was. That was
before you.
That
Okay,
was
I couldn't remember when we if that was the year we overlapped or not. People just came out. You could tell if they were big Spike Lee fans, they did enjoy the movie. But if they were just like, oh, the Spike Lee movie, I'll go check this out, did not like this at all. What they did when they were writing the screenplay though was kept a lot of the original dialogue, if not just writing in that specific type of I don't know what you call it, like a cadence. I haven't read this in a while. It's not exactly like iambic pentameter, like Shakespearean dialogue, but it's it's a play that was written in like 400 BC or something. Like it's old language, and they kind of updated it, but it has like a poetry kind of flavor to the language. Even in like the clips from the trailer, they kind of hide a little bit that language because I think they were worried it was going to put people off. I dug it. I thought it was really an amazing way to tell a story. As was the time when Aristophanes wrote the original play Lysistrata, there's a chorus kind of characters to this. In the original one, I think it was like a man and a woman were like the chorus, the narrators, as we would call it. In this one, he gave it directly to Sam Jackson, who talks directly to the camera and tells us the story of Lysistrata via Southside Chicago. And his chorus name is Dolomedes, which I fucking love. It cracks me up because that's a Dolomite reference, and why wouldn't you have a Dolomite reference in your Aristophanes adaptation screenplay? He kind of talks you through the whole story. Cinematography by Matthew Lee Batik, who is a frequent collaborator with Darren Aronofsky and has done some amazing work, and I think he does amazing work in this particular environment too. He captures some of like the public art, the varied landscape of architecture within the South Side of Chicago, but also goes in and out of some of the local businesses. It's kind of a heightened sense of fashion with Lysistrata and her crew, especially as the strike escalates. And the other part of this that I think really kind of hits our themes, I kind of like when we were talking about, I thought of this in relation, we were talking about summertime on our summertime episode. This movie is like, it's a musical, it's a comedy, it's a drama, it's a crime film. Like, it's got all of these things when you put together, you're like, this tonally should be a mess. And I don't think it is at all. I think Spike Lee is very comfortable when he's mashing together different tones and really hopping from like one beat to the next. And I think he carries the audience through brilliantly in this one. At the time, I thought it was his best film since Bamboozled. And what I think really connects in this particular movie for me is Spike Lee is working on channeling his, how do we say it? Like, he's channeling his righteous indignation about a societal ill, but he's doing it through his art form, which is cinema. And I think it comes across brilliantly in this one and takes us out of New York and LA.
So, I have not seen this one. I remember it came in for some criticism specifically from sort of Chicago activist types, but I don't remember a lot of the details because it was 7 years ago. So, in the sense that, Spike Lee has a deep understanding of New York, right? At a profound level. I think, one of these we're going to talk about sort of the contradictions within later Spike Lee movies and politics in a certain sense, because I think Black Klansman has deep contradictions. But it's interesting. Yeah, I wonder.
Well, one of the controversies for sure was the name of the movie.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's a pejorative. It's a term that has political usage.
Yes,
let's put it that way, and not good political usage.
But I think Spike Lee is a master showman, and I think you choose a name like that, or you choose a name like Black Klansman with 3 Ks in the middle of it. He's doing that for a reason. I remember, I believe Rahm Emanuel was mayor by then. Yeah. He was mayor by then, and he was kind of outspoken about it. And then Spike Lee called him a bully, I think, and then told him he needed to shut up or something. And I was like, you know what? I'm completely on your side here, Spike. I'm not a fan of that guy. But also, it seemed more of like a regional thing where, like, why don't you just stay in New York and do your New York stories? This is a Chicago thing. I'm like, well, what the fuck? Like, you can't go somewhere else and, make your art with a different location. I thought that was a little unjustified in that regard, but.
Yeah, well, I think it's that he can't. He's not. I mean, lots of people can do that. He can't quite do the same thing he would do for New York because he doesn't know the environment as well. But part of what he's doing is he's making, I haven't seen it, but he's making a heightened movie.
Yo, yeah, for sure.
It's interesting that 3 out of the 5 that we've chosen so far, no, 6, and actually 4 out of the 6 are pretty heightened in terms of reality, right? They operate at a different level than strict, you know, you're not in necessarily the real world exactly in a lot of these movies.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yet they're trying to get across something about urban reality. I mean, it's, you know, and of course, you know, part of it is gun violence in predominantly Black urban neighborhoods is a very complicated political thing, because of course, whenever you're trying to do police violence, Black on Black crime, whatever. I mean, lots of reactionary frameworks are used to both stigmatize, to use, you know, basically, there's a lot of racism in this, in which you're sort of deploying it, and a lot of the incredible amount of work to actually deal with actual street violence is sort of ignored, right? There's massive amounts of activism around this and police violence, and that tends to be sort of elided. So it's an area that can be sensitive when brought up in public, I think, to a certain degree.
Well, then also I think it's interesting that he and Kevin, the co-screenwriter, don't just write an original story about like how this is a horrible problem and what are we doing as a society, or our, you know, channels of elected leaders, like what are they doing to help stem this tide of violence at all? They don't just write something original. They go back to, you know, a classic Greek comedy play about a woman doing a sex strike to end the Peloponnesian War. Like it's interesting that I think that in and of itself is a comment on like this is a problem that societies have faced for a long, long time.
But why does he say that he did? What was behind that choice? Like officially?
I mean, I didn't go back and pull any quotes. I remember reading at the time that it was just like it allows. Well, I mean, it's kind of like, I think all of these movies have like kind of a heightened element to them, but like
yeah, absolutely.
It allows you to kind of ground it and play with this really like interesting way of writing dialogue, and it has like a flow and a poetry to it similar to hip hop music, and also. I'm veering into speculation territory because I'm not remembering exactly some of the quotes he had. I don't know.
When it comes to Spike, I assume you have it all chiseled and stuff. You're 2 New York guys. Interesting. All right.
Right, but I was specifically picking like, late 1800s Civil War New York, and now another New York guy who's not in New York anymore. Debated. There was some debate in my head of like, do I go with The Departed because it's him heading up to Boston? But again, Scorsese and Lee are figures that I think we'll be dealing with in a bit more depth at some point. But I think we're talking about, like I said, American urban landscapes. Got to have, in my opinion, you got to have a Scorsese movie in the mix, and you got to have a Spike Lee movie in the mix.
That's fair.
I promise I will branch out from New York filmmakers with my last pick. But what's your last pick here, Isaac?
I went back to LA. I admit it. I just couldn't. I had some ideas, but I just went like, you know what, screw it. And I'm going to another classic dude director. We've never covered any Michael Mann on this show either, have we?
Not if I can help it, but go ahead. What's your pick, Isaac?
You're wrong. Just wrong there. We should do that. I mean, Collateral from 2004.
Hey, come on, I'll take it. I got 5 stops to make.
What's your name?
Max.
Max. I'm Vincent.
I'll meet you in the alley behind the building.
Oh no! What the hell?
You killed him. Red light, Max.
Hold on.
Man, you were gonna drive me around tonight and never be the wiser, but we're into plan B. Now we gotta make the best of it. Improvise, adapt to the environment. Whatever, man, we gotta roll with it.
You just met him once and you kill him like that?
But I should only kill people after I get to know them?
I'm not up for this.
What are you gonna do about it?
There's a man named Vincent.
I got another DOA.
He's already killed witnesses. He's coming to kill you.
Max! I do this for a living!
Rustling was my work.
Gotta roll with it. Adapt.
Get your hands in the air!
That's fun coming from you.
Which I think is a quintessential LA movie. As often pointed out, Tom Cruise's best role in a lot of ways, and one that's totally atypical for him because he's a villain. And
he's always a villain in my heart, Isaac.
Wow. And then starring Jamie Foxx in an incredible turn, and Jada Pinkett Smith and Mark Ruffalo. And so, part of the premise for this is Jamie Foxx is a LA cab driver who picks up a fare, to make this simple, who turns out to be a contract killer played by Tom Cruise working for the cartels, who forces him to go along with him through the night, knocking off each of his targets. It goes other places. If you haven't seen it, it's actually on Netflix right now. You should watch it. It's actually my favorite Michael Mann, more so than sort of what you'd expect. I mean, I think a lot of times you'd expect Heat or something like that. I think Heat is a masterpiece. It's incredible, but I actually like Collateral more, and part of it is basically Cruise lays it out at the beginning of the movie. This is a city in which everyone is disconnected and unconnected from each other. It's part of what I was pointing out about about Repo Man to a certain degree, the alienation. Well, this is a movie very much about that alienation and the spread. We go all around the city to different places. We're being driven around, but most of it, you're watching roads and freeways, which is the most goddamn LA thing there is. And so that sense of alienation is deep thematically, and the movie ultimately rejects it, right? And fights back against it, and is for human connection, but also for taking opportunities and not losing them. I mean, it's very thematically rich, and all of it is perfectly synchronized with the urban landscape. And of course, like, Michael Mann is very good at soundtracks and has his particular likes. So it's a movie that I absolutely adore. It's actually in my top 20, and once again, it's not in a ways a very realistic story, but the way Michael Mann shoots it is as grounded. I mean, the thing about Michael Mann is he's always like walking a particular tonal line, right? It's so fucking serious, right? He's so serious, and he's shooting things in a way which is like both very good but very grounded or handheld, especially this period, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he makes things that should be completely over the top feel, both mythic and grounded at the same time. And so in a sense, this is both of those. It sort of combines what we found in the different movies here, and uses the urban landscape of LA to carry out its themes so well and so brilliantly, that I just sort of had to put it in there. And yeah, I mean, well, I mean, there's a lot you could say about it, but it's I just couldn't really help having this particular movie in there, even though I'm sick of LA. movies, not the city.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember this being an early film in the discussion of, is digital gonna take over? And I know Michael Mann was one where he's like, well, any tool in my toolbook. And I remember correctly, because I've only seen this movie once, he talked about how it was either this one or Miami Vice, but I feel like it was this one because it was so much like night in it. Isn't it like One Night in LA as well?
I should say it's One Night in LA.
Okay. Talking about how with a digital camera, he's able to film night differently. And I do remember it looking like more like purples for some reason, or like you could see like cloud movement in the sky at night, where I was like, holy shit, like that's a really cool look to like, and a deep like urban environment at nighttime. Also, I'm sure he like wets the streets like he always does and makes it really like reflective and really pops on camera. But I remember it feeling like this isn't how night normally looks on film, and it gives it kind of a not a heightened vibe, but like it's just like a new way to like see a city at night.
it's both heightened, but it's actually what we live, right? Because we're surrounded by noise pollution. I mean, by light pollution.
Right. Not heightened in like the way you were saying with Warriors or Repo Man, just like heightened in like a photography sense.
Yeah, well, he's playing with the cinematic language. He does it more in Miami Vice, but he's doing the same thing. It's this handheld digital thing that he's doing. That is basically you have to, for me at least, you'd have to be at a Michael Mann level to make it look good.
Right.
It's not. I mean, it's not what you'd immediately think of, but because he's that good, he can pull that off and make it not just work to make good movies, but make great movies. So yeah, no, the visual style in this movie is just fascinating, and I'm not as strong on the technicals of filmmaking as I'd like, but you can feel it.
Yeah, that's true. I also find that kind of interesting thematically. I mean, we'll kind of talk a little bit more as we start comparing the movies, but you have two movies that also take place in one night.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. Certain stories just speak to us, I guess. Oh, so I have one last pick I want to throw in the mix before we start trying to figure out how we're going to put together this this double feature. So I'm finally leaving the confines of specifically New York filmmakers, but as I mentioned at the top of the show when I started discussing like kind of how I was going about my picks, I was like, this is regional filmmaking at its best potentially, and I wanted to find a filmmaker who is actively trying to be a cinematic voice for their specific city, because like I feel like if you know kind of like we were saying with Chirac, some of the naysayers were like, well, this isn't your city. I'm like, well, that has to be a prerequisite to film here. That's kind of weird. But I was like, well, let's say this is a prerequisite. Like it's when you're filming, when you're in this particular case, like writing, producing, directing a film that is in the city you are born and raised in, I feel like there's potential there for like some very specific flavor of like, oh, this is how someone from here would make this movie. So one of those that comes to mind is Craig Brewer and his film Hustle and Flow from 2005.
It's like all my days, I've been hearing this beat in my head, man. Like a pounding, but then sometimes, man, it get real soft. Man, it's like I can't be stopped.
Go! I'm gonna make these suckers recognize I ain't playing ho. If you violate off the top, trick, you gotta go. Woo!
His words tell the story.
It's hard out here for a pimp, man, for real. Hold on, I like that, man. It's hard out here for a pimp.
Of the only life he's ever known.
I'm here trying to squeeze $1 out of a dime, and I ain't even got a cent. It takes time, DJ.
The only family he's ever had.
Put your hands right here. You know what this means? It means I can believe in you the same way you believe in me.
And the only chance he'll ever get.
You ain't never gonna be nothing more than what you is right now.
To break free.
My daddy, his heart gave out on him when he was my age. It got me feeling like this is it for me. Feel that.
You know it's hard out here for a pimp.
Hey, man. For Shelby. We bring him in, help him develop our sound. You know he white, right? No, he just light-skinned.
You know it's hard out here for a pimp.
In my eyes, I done seen some crazy things in the streets.
Come on, Skinny Black.
Skinny Black used to spin them little records over in my school.
Last one they put out with Platinum.
Even if he does listen to what we got, man, we still don't know what he gonna do. This dog got him some tricks, man. This is my life, and it's a battle within.
Skinny, this is the man I was telling you about. This here the man.
Just give me a chance to get my voice heard.
Every man has the right to contribute a verse.
Let me sing like you do. Meant the world to me.
You in charge. I want to hear you say that. You my partner. Say it.
I'm in charge.
Everybody got to have a dream.
Wow.
It's set in Memphis. He's a Memphis guy. It's got a really great synopsis, I guess. We've criticized Letterboxd and IMDb synopsis before, but the synopsis on both of those sites is the same one. With help from his friends, a Memphis pimp in a midlife crisis attempts to become a successful hip-hop MC, which sounds awful to me as a description. Pimp in a midlife crisis gets his friends to get I was like, what is this? I think this movie works exceptionally well. You've got this is a 2005 film. You've got a young Terrence Howard who's playing DJ, Jay. Also happens to be, DJ like DJ. You've got Anthony Anderson in there as a friend of his who has some like recording prowess. DJ Qualls plays another character, Shelby, who comes in, who has like actually recording equipment and knows how to kind of produce and, you know, record on a very DIY level. I think they're stapling those like McDonald's like drink holders, those like 4-piece drink holders to the wall to like do some cheap soundproofing. You've also got, again, this 2005, you got a young Taraji P. Henson. She plays a sex worker who's working for DJ, who is the pimp of the description there. She's pregnant, though, so she is not, you know, out actively. I mean, she's like ready to give birth to level pregnant, so she's not out like actually earning. And then you also have Taryn Manning, who has this great role in this one called, her name is Nola in the film. When DJ ends up going to jail for a brief stint, she's the one who sort of takes over his criminal enterprise and starts running it. So now you have female pimp. I don't know if it's I don't know the terminology here. Running the sex workers that are part of their, you know, little criminal empire. Well, empire is a strong word. It's a pretty low rent work here. But it's kind of fascinating how people do come together. There is, you know, kind of the horrors of like running a low level, you know, prostitution ring in a poor neighborhood in Memphis is on display here. And it's not like a, you know, grindhouse nasty film from like the 70s, but like it does portray like, you know, there are some dangers with this particular kind of line of work. But it's really interesting how it focuses on this, like, well, I have this dream of, you know, becoming a successful hip hop artist. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's scrappy. It's really interesting. It has definitely the flavor of like these neighborhoods that Craig Brewer and the crew were filming in are neighborhoods that I'm not sure like a location scout would be like, oh, let's go film here, because it's not particularly safe, but like it's a city he knows and it's certain people that he knows that allow him to film in areas that maybe you wouldn't generally go in if it was a big Hollywood production. His Craig Brewer's first film, actually, The Poor and the Hungry, was even a more like low rent version in Memphis. I didn't pick that one though because it's not very well known and it's really hard to find at this point. But he, you know, wrote, shot, directed, edited, produced. I think did everything but was in it and made the movie for like $5,000. But again, he has several movies now where he's stuck with the Memphis setting and is really trying to capture the flavor of his town and the people that he was around, kind of being on the margins of society as he was growing up, and kind of telling those stories. And I think it works remarkably well here. The payoff for this one in particular is they're trying to get together a demo tape because Skinny Black, who is a rapper, a hip hop artist that's made it pretty decent splash nationally, who's from Memphis, is coming back home to like party for, it might even be like a Labor Day weekend or something. That's played by Ludacris. So like you actually have somebody who's known as a hip hop artist in the movie playing kind of a more comical version of himself. Although, I mean, his stage name is Ludacris. So that tells you something about his persona and kind of the ups and downs and how to, you know, try to make this dream you've got work while you're actually having to do work in order to barely scrape by and exist within society as well. I don't know, it captures all of that, but in a highly entertaining and not really stylized way. It kind of has my kind of a scrappy, like Mean Streets kind of vibe to it, I would say, but with a heavy dose of music mixed in as well, in a performative way, not in a use on the soundtrack the way that he does in Mean Streets.
Interesting. I've never seen this movie. Sorry, you lay that you throwed so much out there. I'm just sort of like, oh wow,
it's good. It's good. And, you know, the title being Hustle and Flow as well. Like you have to hustle to get by because these are not like gainfully employed people. They're like scraping by already on their own, just putting together their own work, you know, on the, you know, illegal side of things. And the flow element obviously being like the music aspirations, but also like, hey, this guy's got some talent. Like he's constantly kind of like workshopping songs and keeps a notebook on him and everything else. So it's like, oh yeah, this could be a way out of this, you know, horribly poor, economically depressed situation that we're all stuck in. And it's interesting too, because having Taraji P. Henson's character being visibly pregnant, like near giving birth, there's like this element of like, there's new life coming into this kind of family unit that's put together haphazardly here amongst friends. And there's a feeling of like vulnerability that comes about because you know that she's there, and then there's going to be like a newborn baby into this particular environment. You're like, I really hope they make it because this is now the best environment for a newborn. And I do think also it's one of those it can only be set in Memphis the way that he does it.
Okay, see that's really important.
Yeah.
And in some way, okay, Interesting.
Because it
All
really
right.
gets into that, like how music evolves in that scene. Like if I can get this demo tape out and I can get it to this local DJ, I know, he likes this type of music. I know so-and-so who knows so-and-so, and they can get this into his hands and make it played on the radio. Then I might get a little like rep for myself locally, and then people are going to know who I am, and that's going to make me more attractive to a label. Like it's very dug into the music scene in which it's set in.
That's something we've really been missing here. Well, all right. Actually, that's not true because our last movie, our last LA movie, not the last episode we did was about was a movie populated with artists doing poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So we've definitely gotten that sense of art scenes, but music scenes are so particular, right? And to particular urban areas, right, and are really important in the way that they develop there.
Yeah,
and we haven't. This is, I think, the only one of our movies that actually deals with that.
It's interesting, yeah, because Summertime wasn't necessarily about the scene itself. It was like using the art that came out of a specific scene in LA as the structure, or sorry, the narrative of the film. Whereas this is like the scene as it is itself is like part of the film. I don't know if I described that well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Like the poetry workshops that inspired Summertime aren't the focus of, they aren't in the plot. But
right.
The plot is the result of those workshops. Whereas this one, like, yeah, the scene itself is part of the plot or the narrative here. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the film. It's just, all right, now I want to see this because it just sounds like an interesting use of all, a way of combining all of these things.
Yeah. I think so.
Ooh. But I think we're at that time.
I think we are at that time. It's double feature time. And I feel like, do you want to start with like each picking one that the other person put forward, see if they match up? Like of the three I pitched, like which one do you want to see the most?
Okay. Well, in a double feature.
Yeah, like I'll pick one of yours and you pick one of mine. That way we're not picking our own babies here. And we'll smash them together and see if it works and then start brainstorming.
So list yours off again. I just want to have this on my deck.
So I have, in no particular order, Gangs of New York, Martin Scorsese's film from 2002, Chirac, Spike Lee's film from 2015. Also, I should say that one is set in Chicago. Gangs of New York is set in New York. And Craig Brewer's Hustle and Flow from 2005, which is set in Memphis.
So I hate to pick the only one of those that I've actually seen, but I also think it works better with some of my picks in terms of sort of thematics to a certain degree, though it sounds like Hustle and Flow you could actually do some work with as well in terms of sort of looking at masculinity and striving, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think Hustle and Flow sounds like you could do that.
Yeah.
But I'm probably, I'm torn. Well, remember, like the last time, we don't actually have to stick to one. We create one and then we'll see if we want to build another one too, to double feature. But I'm going to go with Gangs of New York for now.
I think that is a good pick. I kind of want to pair that up with Collateral.
Interesting.
Because it is very much like kind of a current city. And I think that would contrast really interestingly with like the birth of a city that comes out of Gangs of New York. And I also think there are two filmmakers, Scorsese for Gangs of New York and Michael Mann for Collateral, that are really fascinated with urban spaces in their movies. And their approaches to me are very different. Not just in the way that they're filming them, but in the stories they're choosing to take on as well.
So in a certain sense, it's their contrast.
I think so, yeah. And I think that would play really interesting together. I think I would do Gangs of New York first and Collateral second, just for like a chronology thing, like old school city versus modern city. And I think that could be really interesting because the general theme I get off of a lot of Scorsese stuff is like that I should say Michael Mann first gives me more of like, no connections, no hangups, kind of very alienated kind of feeling for the characters. Everything from like Thief to Heat to Collateral. Like these aren't about people like finding a family or having like a group or, you know what I mean? And Scorsese's ones always seem like they have at the core like kind of a makeshift community, if not an actual community or family.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think those could play off each other in an interesting way. I don't know if I want that to be like our official double feature, but I kind of dig that. that combo.
Yeah, it's not what I expected at all. I'm sort of mulling it over. Like I think this is not what I would suggest for double feature. I think Gangs of New York and The Warriors would be really interesting just because they're two movies about gangs in New York.
Oh, yeah, that is kind of fun, actually.
It's fun. It's not what we're doing, but it's fun, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, look, nothing changed.
All those years later, it's still about gang territory.
It's just still about gang territory and like being over the top.
Yeah. I mean, which has kind of got some flavors in Chirac as well, to be honest.
Yeah, no,
Territory
definitely. Could I throw out another?
Yeah. What you got?
Let's see. I think either Mikey and Nikki or Rocky might be interesting with Hustle and Flow. Both
interesting
because of both are about, well, okay, Rocky and Hustle and Flow, because they're both about movies about striving, right? To become something, to raise yourself up, to reach a full potential, right? If I'm getting Hustle and Flow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that works, and both very grounded in their particular urban areas.
Well, honestly, even something you said when you were talking about Rocky and Mikey and God damn it, Mikey was working class people with maybe some vague mob connections who are trying to live up to their full potential.
Yes,
is there and Hustle and Flow, different style of like, you know, mob meaning maybe just like underground, you know, markets or whatever, but still like, yeah, that is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
but it sounds like with like Elaine May's got two characters that are hustling themselves.
I mean, part of the reason I didn't like jump on that comparison is that it's I don't know, is Hustle and Flow a tragedy? Does he make it? Should we spoil it?
It would pair well knowing the ending of Rocky.
See, that's the thing, is I think Rocky and Hustle and Flow worked better together because Mikey and Nikki.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't want to say it's a tragedy because I don't want to talk about the ending, but it's a 70s American movie.
I was going to say Hustle and Flow has like a flavor of like a 70s ending in that, I mean, it's not, I don't think it's a movie you can necessarily spoil with the ending, but like it doesn't go according to what their plan is, but there is like some hope at the end, similar to Rocky. I mean, I think Rocky's a famous enough ending. We're not spoiling anything with the ending of Rocky. You know, it's Rocky. But no, I feel like tonally, like those endings are really close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting one. I'm kind of jazzed about that one actually. That's one I didn't see coming.
No, I didn't either. So I think, should we say that we have two? I think this is the second time we've done this, and both times I think we've had two viable ones. I think there's actually, with these movies, there's multiple combinations you could do.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I also, I sort of set mine up for being, I think, some pretty good double features in themselves.
I see what you did there. So you snuck in. We actually have 4 double features on this one.
We kind of do, but one of them, they're sort of a cheat because one is about my preferences and so forth.
I mean, solid themes either way. With yours as well. But I like the. I think it's a good format for when we do these double feature episodes. Like we each pick one of the other persons that we want to see and match them up together, but then also like actually putting together a couple of picks. But yeah, the more we talked it through, I was like, oh, Hustle and Flow and Rocky. There is some really good overlap there. That's really interesting. Is that what would be the order for the Hustle and Flow Rocky pairing?
I don't really know. I'm actually not sure it matters, but you know Hustle and Flow better, so that would.
I feel like I would do Hustle and Flow first and then Rocky because Rocky is more well known. So if you're, I mean, I'm picturing this is our fictional, like we're hosting this double feature at a theater for people to come out to, right? So if you were coming out to a Politics of Cinema double feature in a theater, I feel like Hustle and Flow is the lesser well known of the two. So like you're there, it's the first movie, you're really paying attention, and even if you don't like it, you got Rocky there at the end. Like that's going to get people out, I think.
Yeah. No, that's just it. It's to give them what they didn't know they wanted.
Right. So you get like the fresh eyes on something maybe you haven't seen, and then like a Stone Cold classic right after that everybody's like, oh yeah, I want some Rocky in the theater. So I'll sit through this other movie first. That's not a very good way to pitch it, I guess, but I think it works.
And then for Collateral and Gangs of New York, yeah, you were sort of going chronologically.
I think chronological would be interesting there, but I think it could work either way.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's the thing. Gangs of New York's also one of his, that's like a 3-hour movie. Collateral, I don't think is 3 hours.
It's less than 2.
Right. So like, do you want in a double feature, do you want the longer movie second or first?
Second.
Interesting.
The reason I say that is, well, no, normally you wouldn't want it. But part of it is anybody going to want to be there for the second movie? If you have the shorter movie second, it's going to get, I don't know, people will just be so burned out by then they won't be able to get any of it. Whereas people will be relatively fresh after a 2-hour one.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, yeah, all right, that works. And it keeps the chronology order going for that one as well, which is kind of interesting. So, sweet. So one double feature that we created here was Gangs of New York and Collateral. And then the other second double feature we've got here is Hustle and Flow and Rocky. Nice.
So ends our theme for the summer. The summer is officially over.
That's true. Although I feel like American Urban Landscapes are going to be popping up just in my mind now as we're watching future films for the show. Sharing how some of our themes go. Like that's just now something in the back of my mind I'm paying attention to when I watch American films. But well, with that theme and that series wrapped up, Isaac, what have we got in front of us for the fall here?
It's Halloween time.
It is.
Oh, you're like, it's the beginning of September? 1, it's always Halloween. 2, the beginning of September. There's only one holiday that is allowed to have mission creep. Okay? Allowed to expand itself out. And it is not Christmas.
No.
And definitely not. It is Halloween. Halloween has a season on this podcast. So, yeah. We are going to do 2 Halloween themes episodes. Previous years, we did art house cinema, the 2010s, or art house horror, and then we did Romero. But this year we're gonna do 2 episodes that do different things. We're going to be doing, for our first episode of the Halloween season, bad trips. Yes, and by that I mean bad trips on drugs.
Yeah, I was saying we don't mean voyages here.
Which would be a great horror theme, frankly.
Oh yeah, like modern wise, like Midsummer, like travel to someplace else and it goes all wrong.
The worst vacations, dude. We could do what's that Australian one?
Lost Weekend?
Oh, I can't remember. And Midsummer, because they're both about relationships falling apart on vacation.
Okay. You cannot get out of double feature mode no matter what.
We're putting this in a doc. Okay, this is not going away.
Long weekend.
Yes. Long weekend and Midsummer. We're not losing this. I love it. I love it so much. But that's not what we're doing. There's a lot of drug horror movies to choose from, but we're going to choose 2. Should we announce them or should we let it be a surprise?
I think it should be a surprise because we're probably going to change our mind 5 more times before we get there. But
you're not supposed to say that on the air.
Well, because you had pointed out there's this interesting thing where like horror movies that are I can't remember how you were really describing them. Like they're bad trips, but they're like this. You said it was like the cultural hangover from the 60s and how it get somehow channeled into these bad trip like horror films in the 70s and 80s.
Well, part of it is the 2 movies we're talking about there. One of them is actually modern and is dealing with the cultural material from the 80s and 60s and they're clashing, right? And so in a certain sense, it's not a commentary on that, but is dealing with using that material. And the other one is directly that, is directly about, we've dealt with the hangover from the 60s multiple times. It's the return of the Secaucus 7 effect, right? Which is actually not a movie that we've covered. But, it's sort of been there, but in horror form, it also is interesting. So, yeah, that was sort of what I wanted to go for a little bit. Now I just want to watch Midsommar, and I just want to watch the worst fucking relationship movies of all time. And by that, I mean masterpiece level relationship movies.
So October 2023, we'll do like relationship horror. I don't know if that's how that's actually going to work out, but anyway, We'll figure that out off the air. But before we officially go off the air, just a quick reminder to be sure to rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you are using. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend or two about it. We're also up and running on the usual blah, blah, blahs. Check out the show notes and whatever device you're listening to this on. And the links are there if you are so interested. And until next time, I am Aaron.
And I'm Isaac, and I'm just saying, stay safe out there. There's actually a heat wave in California, which is where I am. So stay safe. I mean, we don't have air conditioning in like the buildings I'm in, because they just assumed they wouldn't need it because things would stay the same. But welcome to the Anthropocene capital scene. We live in a new geological age, and it's just not going to work that way. I feel like I've done this one, and will continue to do this one, because this is the big danger. The maximum danger. But yeah, stay cool as the summer supposedly ends.